And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike Owen.
Welcome to the show. Yes. Yes, thank you. Oh, I know it's great to be back. Thank you. Keep clapping. Clap if you believe. How would we know that you believe if you didn't keep clapping? Welcome to my fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. It is so great to join you today, Wednesday, May 29th, the year of our Lord 2019. Thank you again for joining us. I'm so happy to be here. I would have been equally happy to be here last week, but I wasn't able to because I had like 3 guests and each one wasn't able to join for a different reason. And so we ended up not being able to do that. But glad to have you here. We, as always, are a Muddied Waters media production. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Anchor, Twitter, Periscope, iTunes, Google Play. We're everywhere. Check us out everywhere. Give us 5-star reviews everywhere. Definitely check us out on anchor.fm. More on that later. That is our anchor.fm/muddied waters. So thank you again. And be sure to share this video. I know what you're thinking. My Facebook friends list or my YouTube followers list or what have you is desperately missing out on a roughly 1 hour long libertarian podcast. Well, that doesn't have to be the reality. You can share this with them. You can give them the gift of Spike Cohen. Kids love it. Be sure to share it. The intro and outro music on this and every episode of My Fellow Americans is from the amazingly talented Mr. Joe Davi. That's Jodavi. Check him out on Facebook, SoundCloud. Check him out on Bandcamp. It's jodavimusic.bandcamp.com. Buy his entire discography. When this video's over, immediately, or podcast, however you're listening or watching this, go to that, buy his entire discography. Go ahead and do that. You'll be so happy. Thank you to Kroger for the delicious purified drinking water that I'm drinking on this episode. Bulavanaka. Good stuff. Shout out to Tehran Turks' mom. Guys, my guest tonight, we've actually had him on before. He is a good friend of mine. I describe him as he has been described by me as the libertarian Jonathan Pye. And I'm hoping that'll stick any day now. He is a political trainer and consultant. He's regularly featured on the Foundation for Economic Education. His work can also be found on Fox Business Network, Huffington Post, Independent Voter Network, and many other outlets. He is author of the book If You Can Keep It, and most recently he had developed a program called the Weapons of Mass Persuasion. He is on today to talk about something that he has been working on, a project he's been working on. And I'm just going to let him get started because there's nothing I can do to properly prepare you for him. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Mr. Robin Koerner. Robin, thank you so much for joining us. Yes. It's a common vernacular. You know. Oh, you're right. It's not entire. It is not. To be fair, it is not entirely Jewish. I will give you that. You know, listen, I have an audience. I got to keep my audience happy. They like the Lord, a lot of them. Some of them, not all of them. No guests. I'm being told no guest sound. Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, no, it's not you. It's definitely not you. Say something now.
Let's testing 1 2 3 again.
I see the bars, so that's
okay,
good.
Bars. We like bars.
We like bars.
The gin and
Okay.
whiskey, but we will take whatever bars you've got on your screen.
Exactly. So how have you been doing?
Oh, all right. Thanks for asking, mate. I actually have just gotten back from the UK, where I was visiting family for the first time in 2 years, which was overdue, very overdue. My family are getting to the age where a majority have health issues at any given time. All the more reason to be there and giving love and moral support.
Right.
It was great. I was there just for a couple of weeks this time. Usually it's a bit longer when I go back, but I can't say usually because I haven't been back in 2 years beforehand that, right? So 2 weeks, and had perfect weather all the time, and got to walk. Poldark, the show Poldark. Have you heard of that?
No.
Poldark. Okay, so it's one of these big BBC historical dramas that the Brits do so well that PBS then take and run, and it got quite a following here in the States. It's got a massive following in the UK, and it's actually about a guy that comes back from the American War of Independence, and he's this Cornish landowner, and he tries to restart his life in Cornwall, right, which is where the center of the mining in the Industrial Revolution was. Cornwall mined the metal that built the industrial world in the southwest of England, and it's absolutely stunning. The scenery, the landscapes are stunning. And anybody who doesn't know Poldark hasn't got a clue what I'm talking about. But any of your listeners who have will be excited to hear that I was walking the coastline that you see in Poldark and visiting some of the little churches and chapels that appear in the show. And they look right now just as they did in the show, which is set around the early 1800s. So that gives you some idea of what I've been enjoying recently.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, cool. And we had someone ask what the jokes were that you were saying. It wasn't really a joke, what they missed when your audio was off. He was just asking a Jew why he referred to the year of our Lord, 2019. And I told him, we live in a society, basically. So, well, that's good. So you've been doing well. So the last time we had you on, we were talking about something that you had just started then called the Weapons of Mass Persuasion program. And obviously we have a whole episode about that. It is episode number, I want to say 17. I think it was, 19. 19?
Okay.
17? I don't know. It is an episode that we had a while back. But if you will, just give us a brief, 19, episode 19, Weaponized Libertarianism with Robin Koerner. That was the one where you famously said that a good number of libertarians are mildly autistic, among other things. You said other good things. That was my takeaway. That's what I remember when people say, "What if someone said,
that might have been your summary? Was that your summary of what I was? Something longer that I said a little more carefully.
It's hazy. It's hazy. It was almost 20 episodes ago.
That's cool.
Something about autism and you. That was what I remember. And libertarianism, autism, Robin Koerner, and that made the what's the association, and that's now how I describe it to people.
It was the autism episode.
It was the autism.
Number 19, a prime number, and this is 37, right? So another prime number.
Wow.
So you have to really have me back at like 53 or something.
So then we're definitely doing the autism thing now, because
right, I'm on it. Yeah, you're right.
We're going, or at least good with numbers. If not, I'm gonna accuse everyone.
I'm a physicist by training, right? This is one of the reasons why I don't just repeat nonsense when it comes to politics and political psychology. I actually care about getting things right rather than spouting whatever I've been indoctrinated with, which is what most universities seem to be about these days. But I always spent my time at university doing physics and doing numbers. So yeah.
Yeah, you were an actual, you were doing a thing. You weren't just theorizing.
You're
actually doing an actual thing.
Where you can't make shit up and pass exams. You just can't. Yeah.
So did you transition into politics so that you could do that? So you could just make shit up? And then was it like, man, this is so much easier to just make it up?
Because I was a physicist and a philosopher of science, that's what I did my master's in. I was always something of the intellectual purist. I've always liked getting truth. I've always been a truth seeker.
Right.
So, they call economics a dismal science, and, that you lay every economist or even politician down end to end and they still wouldn't reach a conclusion, right? I mean, it's like, I wasn't interested in that. That wasn't intellectually appealing to me. I have neither of those disciplines until actually I discovered it was just a thing that turned me. It was a Peter Schiff. Have I ever told you this, Spike?
No, I don't
Peter
believe you have.
Video. So
No.
I mean, this is a little anecdote, but what the hell, it's relevant. I was doing some research for a book I was thinking about writing. It was kind of the first incarnation of the book that you mentioned. Yeah, ultimately, if you can keep it. And I was interested in the American identity and American self-perception. And I was just online, researching. And I came across this YouTube video, Peter Schiff Was Right, which many libertarians and certainly Austrian economist types will no doubt have seen a version of. And here was this guy, Peter Schiff, predicting the housing crash before it happened. Not only saying it was going to happen and more or less when, but expounding the basic axioms on which he made the prediction, and then doing kind of like the logic of the prediction and dumping out with a testable prediction of the kind that Karl Popper would have been quite happy with. And I was like, shit, this sounds like somebody doing like real thinking and kind of something a little bit sciencey. But he's doing
a thing. He's actually doing a thing.
He's doing a thing. And so he'd mentioned in this video this weird thing called Austrian economics. Never heard of that. So I just, next thing was I'll Google that. What's this dude in an investment company on a news show talking about Austrian economics? Like, sounds a bit obscure. And so I looked that up, and, so I read the wiki page on that, and that linked to libertarianism. And then I read the wiki page on that, and the rest was history. So that's how I got into politics, actually.
So you got shift-pilled, basically.
I got shifted, you could say.
You got shifted. Oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
That's even better than what I came up with.
That was the thing. Yeah.
Well, cool. So, and Weapons of Mass Persuasion, give us a 30,000-foot view, Reader's Digest version of what Weapons of Mass Persuasion is.
So Weapons of Mass Persuasion, which is, weaponsofmasspersuasion.com. It's a program, more than 100 units, all videos. They're easy to consume with kind of interactive, question and answers, and also live webinars with me monthly. You can sign up to it on weaponsofmasspersuasion.com. It is a program in what I call the art of political persuasion. It's all the political psychology you need to know to start actually not only winning arguments, but winning supporters, actually changing minds. Because as most activists know, especially libertarian ones, winning arguments doesn't usually win supporters. And in fact, it doesn't win. Period.
Doesn't it? That's weird, because I have told a lot of people that I'm right. And and yet libertarians do not win elections as a result of my being right. No. Some would say that kind of proves the point that you were just making.
Well, let's say this. It's certainly a data point in favor. Yes. Keeping my scientific hat on, I was going to say,
it's very sciencey response. But okay, so cool. So with that in mind, that's sort of your MO. I mean, even before Weapons of Mass Persuasion was that you have to actually relate to people, and you actually have to talk to people where they are and get where they're coming from, and build, for lack of a better word, for introvertarians, make connections with people and actually like have a human experience with people. You can't shove ideology and, especially a fringe ideology, but you can't, something that's outside of the Overton window, you can't shove it down their face with, even if it's right, and we're all, or most of us are either libertarian or libertarian leaning that are watching this, we believe we're right, awesome, and we can tell them we're right, and that doesn't make us wrong, but it also doesn't really help, and it kind of makes us look, some would say smug. I would definitely say smug. I am a serious smugger. This show is mostly about being smug. It takes a lot to tell my wife. Let me get myself in here, because this is for me to tell my wife my opinion is so important that I'm taking over the guest room, and it's going to be my studio where I tell people how right I am once a week. So in the spirit of not doing that, in the spirit of actually building stuff with people, talk to us about your new project and you know what you want to accomplish with that.
Okay, so before I do, just to your point, I just want to say, kind of encapsulate it by saying, look, you can't change somebody's mind unless you understand how minds are actually made up. Just like you wouldn't try and get a car working if the engine was faulty without understanding how the engines work, right? I mean, it's at that level of basic. But people do that all the time when it comes to political persuasion. So you go through Weapons of Mass Persuasion and you actually learn the process by which people form political opinions, and then I'll teach you how to hack that process. And that's the simplest way to put it.
Very cool.
But to your last question, or your most recent question, where to begin with the new project? All right, yes. So some people who've been following me on social media will have noticed that a few months ago, before I headed off to the UK, I kind of put out a cryptic request for anybody who follows my work, likes my style, and would be interested in finding out more about a project, a large project that I was developing, but that I'm going to need a significant amount of volunteer help for. And a few people came forward, which was great. And I've actually therefore lined up a little team, all of whom I have given more information about this project than I'm about to give to you. But the gist of it, Spike, and listeners, it is kind of the following. And I should preface it by saying, I think a lot of folks in the liberty movement know that, if you like, my kind of claim to fame, my pedigree, if you like, in political persuasion was what I did with Blue Republicans. So like back in 2012, I created the biggest coalition for Ron Paul that the campaign identified, and they were called Blue Republicans.
Right.
I built folks from, actually the other side of the political spectrum, largely progressives. And I kicked it off with this article called "If You Love Peace, Become a Blue Republican Just for a Year." And hundreds of thousands, if not more people, identified Blue Republican, many or most of them Democrats or independents, and switched parties and voted for Ron Paul. So that's the story. Now, I say that because in some ways, what I'm looking to do now is a version of that for modern times, but instead of doing it for the benefit of a particular candidate, I'm doing it with a more fundamental goal, a more general goal, you might say, of solving the problem that 70% of people, anecdotally and according to polls, see with American politics right now, which is that we are off the end in terms of tribalism, polarization, divisiveness and division, and a desire not to judge ideas without judging the people who have them. Right. And there's a big, but on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or your favorite YouTuber in the political realm. And pretty much you're going to hear, everything is kind of effed up because we can't talk to each other. We don't trust each other, all of this stuff. So lots of people get that that's a problem. And in what I do, giving speeches and presentations, in the political world, anecdotally, I see that is indeed the case. So there's this idea that people want to, they don't want it to be this way. They don't want to have to vote for their tribe. They don't, like this because there's no other option. They certainly don't want to have to vote for the lesser of two evil tribes. But on the other hand, they hate themselves for doing it because at the end of the day, when you've only got a choice between two tribes, you're going to vote for the one that you think is, not the most evil.
Harm reduction, like doing the least harm possible when you're given two horrible options. Right.
And I think people except that here's the thing, like it's not really the least harm possible in principle. It's just the least harm that I can conveniently do at this election. Right. And we're just caught up in that. And people are sick of it. And maybe a little more specifically, and again, this is confirmed by a lot of polls and surveys now, decent, let's say decent conservatives, decent liberals, progressives, middle of the road Democrats, middle of the road Republicans, most of them are looking at the extreme identitarian wings on the left and the right, even on their side, and going, this is kind of nuts, right? Like, this is what we don't want to be. And so in some respects, you know, decent, normal, regular, moderate Republicans are feeling like they've got more, that their Republican neighbor actually has more in common with them than the extreme version of the Democrat, of which, you know, of the party they might be a member of, right?
Oh, easily. Yeah, definitely.
So there's this readiness to kind of reorient. And certainly I could talk a lot about how the pendulum has kind of swung to the extreme on both sides, right? So this is kind of the background. And when I say this to people, as I'm saying it to you, as you have just done, people say, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. So now the next point to make.
There aren't a lot of people arguing against that. Like, no, politics is great right now. I have really good choices and I'm happy with them. Right.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So what's happened is this pendulum is kind of hitting its limit in as much as the reaction has already begun. In this extreme, the seeds of the reversal have been sown. So, for example, you have organizations with names like More in Common, Purple America, Better Angels, that are trying to facilitate. They're trying to do in certain ways what I try and do on a big scale with my political communication, which is to break through to people who may completely disagree with you, who may not trust you, who may be skeptical of your moral basis, right? All of the things that cause political dialogue to be so hard, to be persuasion to be so hard, especially in the environment that we just outlined. Right. So you've got these organizations that are, if you like, solving bits of the problem. So for example, one of those organizations actually finds Republicans and Democrats and facilitates discussions between them, right? And you have to be a Republican or a Democrat, you know, in one of the tribes to participate, right? And so that's a good way in, right? That's something that they're doing. It's really it's interesting. It's having some positive effect. Right. And actually, if you're interested in that, check out an interview I did with a guy called John Wood Jr. from Better Angels, which you can find on YouTube. Just Google Koerner, John Wood Jr. or whatever. I put it in the YouTube search. There's a lot of interesting things. Now, that's all great, but people's sense of the problem is very fundamental and very general. And what I do, best of all, is, you know, I can create political brands that facilitate effective marketing of good ideas. And so I see the bit of the solution that's still missing. There's no brand that might enable me, let's say if I was a Democrat, to talk to my Republican friend. Like, there's nothing I can hang my hat on that enables me to talk to my Republican friend without him feeling threatened by my democratic values if I'm a Democrat, right? Like, there's nothing to break through the suspishon. There's nothing that's positive about what I am. Everyone, Democrat or Republican.
Right. Everyone is waiting for their belief system to be attacked, and they've tied it to their, in many ways, very often, their self-worth. So now you're not just attacking what they believe, you're attacking who they are. And I believe we talked about this in the autism episode, where we said that, you know, people have this tied to who they are. We do. Listen, if you're watching an hour-long podcast with two guys talking about libertarianism, this is a part of who you are. And when someone challenges that, even within libertarianism, when someone challenges that, your hackles go up, your defenses go up, and you're no longer having a discussion. You're already in fight mode to the extent that you're now going to defend your belief system, throwing out any reason or logic. You've entrenched your beliefs. This is what I believe. I don't need to question or examine that anymore because I'm not having a friendly dialogue with someone. I am now in a fight for the very, the integrity of my belief system and myself as a person as a result of it.
There's a lot of that, and it's basically a zero-sum fight, right? And
yes,
and
yes.
And then after the fact that in American politics, if I'm a Democrat and somebody's talking to me who disagrees with me, right, which is the reason I'm having the discussion in the first place, if he's even moved enough to be having the discussion and to be engaging me and to be trying to change my mind, guess what? He's a Republican. In other words, he's from the opposition. Like he's not just from this other safe, whatever it is. He's got the label that says, I can't trust him, right? And that is the stuff of American politics.
Yeah, so, he's not just a Republican; he's an anti-democrat. He's against me. Yeah, right.
Yeah, because it's essentially oppositional, and it's not just oppositional. It's there's been a lot of moral mudslinging, right? So it's not just that I oppose you on your policies. It's that I don't trust where you're coming from. I don't trust how you're seeing or experiencing the world. People like you, depending on what side you're on, want to kill babies or interfere with my body, right? Whatever it is, both of which are pretty shit, depending on what side of that issue you're on, right? So there's this visceral. It's visceral, right?
Oh, geez, very visceral. Yeah.
Right. So this is all still the setup for where I'm going. Now, I mentioned Blue Republicans. One of the reasons that the Blue Republican idea was so powerful, why it actually created an identifiable coalition that actually moved the dial for Ron Paul's candidacy in 2012 to such an extent, was that I didn't just make the case that there was a great progressive argument, pro-peace, pro-civil rights argument for this ultra-conservative Republican, as they called him back then. I actually created an identity that meant that I self-identify as a progressive Democrat and then go and become Republican for a year and vote for Ron Paul. And in that case, the identity was Blue Republican. So I could call myself a Blue Republican and a Democrat. So it was a kind of a cover, right? It was kind of a way to enable me to move in a different direction according to my principles and conscience without feeling the threat against my identity, which was kind of what we were talking about, right? So now, when it comes to solving the problem of the division in American politics, you've got to do the same thing. That psychological function has to be also served today. We have to give people a positive identity that they feel that they can adopt without saying, like, let's say if they're a Democrat, they can still be a Democrat, but they can be this other thing too. That when they identify somebody else with this other thing too, this other identity, those two people, even if they completely disagree on policy, on politics, even if one's a Democrat and one's a Republican, can say, you know what? I'm sure I'm going to disagree with you on everything, but because I have this other identity that you also have, I don't need to be threatened by the way this discussion is going to go, because we are both positively buying into a certain set of principles with respect to how we conduct politics, not the policies we support, but how we're going to talk to each other, how we're going to assess our policies, how we're going to assess each other's arguments, how we're going to conduct those arguments. So what I've done is this new project is the creation of a new identity, a new brand. And you will know if it succeeds because when somebody asks you in the future, in a few years, what are your politics? You might say, well, I'm a libertarian, but I'm a libertarian. Or I'm a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat. Or I'm a Republican, but I'm a this new word Republican. So that's the signal. And it's going to be like that. Again, it's just that label that means it's a meta tribe or a tribe that transcends the politically divided tribes of Republican and Democrat. And so it's going to do a lot of psychological work. Now, I'm not just coming up with a name and a brand. I am doing that. But in the launch of this, I am actually going to lay out the positive, I'll call them again, meta-political principles that I know people across the political spectrum can sign up to that reflect how they want politics to be done. that they can sign up to as individuals without conceding any of their passionately held current political views. So, for example, the idea that we should be able, at least in the first instance, to judge ideas without judging the people who have them. That's a good one. The idea that
that's a good one, and that's a big one too.
That's a big one. The idea that whatever your policy position, the moral burden is on the person who would impose on another person to make the case. You're not saying so a libertarian would say you never impose on another person, blah, blah, right? Okay, that might be a bit too much for a progressive. But you can get a progressive to say, okay, if I'm going to make the case that I got to take something away from someone and give it to someone, or I've got to tell somebody what they can or cannot do, the moral burden is on me to prove it. Now, that's a principle for judging policy that you can get conservatives and progressives to buy into. And I'm going to hang 10 or 20 such things on this one word label that I am confident, if I can get the platforms, I can get enough people to say, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Republican, or I'm a Libertarian, or I think it's all a bunch of hogwash, but I'm a this thing.
I'm an X.
In other words, this is how, so that's the idea. And I said that a bunch of people have come forward and expressed an interest in this project. So I've actually told them a lot of what I told you, and then I sent them a launch article, an article that basically outlines what this is in more detail, in its specifics, and said, read this, and if you think you could say, yes, sign me up to this, regardless of what your current politics are, could you say you are also a this as well as being a Democrat, a Libertarian, or a Republican? If so, it's successful. And let me know if you want to volunteer to help me make it go mainstream. And I'm pleased to say that almost all of them said, wow, yes, this is it. This is what we've been needing. So I think it's the everybody has identified the problem at a fundamental and general level. The problem is described fundamentally and generally, but there isn't a solution that mirrors the problem that is understood equally as fundamentally and equally as generally. And a good writer, a good persuader, is able to put into words feelings that people have, things that people want, that they can't articulate themselves. They give, an effective persuader can give others the way of articulating, of bringing into their conscious mind, and therefore using something they feel at their gut. So that's the skill I'm bringing to what I now think is, as I say, 70% of Americans think is the fundamental problem with American politics, which is that it's broken.
Very good, very good. Yeah, and that sounds very good. I have a few questions about this new program, but first I usually have an amazing segue, and I don't right now, other than we're about halfway into the episode, and so we have to do our little plug to help pay our bills. I wish this paid our bills. It will soon. But guys, are any of you looking to make a podcast? Because if you are, you want to check out Anchor.fm. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. And it is. Everything I'm about to tell you is actually true. So I am shilling, but I'm not shilling. Like, this is true. All these things are true. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free. And you can use it right from your phone or your computer. We use Anchor.fm, so literally these things are correct. It has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast, so it sounds great. That's also true. They even distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard anywhere on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, you name it, many, many more. And this is the best part and why we switched to them. You can easily actually make money from podcasting with Anchor, with no minimum listenership. We have gone to many other platforms that said, oh, yeah, you make a lot of money. And you don't make any money unless you have thousands upon thousands of listeners for each episode. If there's any kind of a dip, you're not making money anymore. With Anchor, you're making money right off the bat. We're actually making money. for the first time. Muddied Waters Media, actually making money. So if you are looking to make a podcast, be sure to download the Anchor app for Android or iPhones, or go to anchor.fm to get started. And that is my at least 30-second plug that is required to be made. You'll be doing that as well once you're on Anchor. And if you are on Anchor, be sure to let us know. We'll check out your podcast. We will positively review your podcast, unless it's like Nazism or something like that. I can't promise we'll I mean, if it's like if you're advocating something terrible, we can't give a positive review for, like, you know, I don't know, some kind of eugenics thing or something like that. Communism, like, you know, I mean, there are limits to what, but it's something that isn't going to result in lots of people dying. We will give you a positive review, and we hope you give us a positive review on our anchor.fm. Be sure to check that out. So, Robin, back to the actual show. Thank you for your patience on that.
I'm still here.
Yeah, thank you. So with this this program,
it's not a program. It's a new identity. It's a new brand. It is a new brand, you could say. It's
okay, so
not something you
fair
go
enough.
through. It's something you literally just declare, I'm this. This is what I buy into these principles. It's literally that.
Okay, so I'm going to do, when I tell people I'm an anarchist, I'm going to do to you what you did. Well, how will that work? And I have to describe the entirety of how a society will work. Fair enough. So how does this play out? Give us an example of how a common political conversation is happening now compared to how it would happen under this new brand.
In a way, it's really, really simple. Because if you and I both say, I'm this new thing, I'm just going to, it starts with H. So I'm going to just call it H for now, right? I'm an H, and you say I'm an H. Then because we both know what that means, that signals to each other that we've signed up to basic principles of civility vis-a-vis our political discussions and disagreements. So now we can actually have those discussions. Now I'm not filtering what you say through, I need to be skeptical because he's going to try and, bait and switch me on some principle, or try and, pull me. Right. To agree on this. And then he's got me, eating babies, right? Like a lot of people seem to think of their political opponents. And by saying I'm an H, you're both implicitly or maybe explicitly signing up to a set of principles by which you conduct the discussion and then judge the opinions that you're expressing and the arguments that you're making. And they are carefully chosen to not be politically loaded at all, right? So you don't have to have an ideology. All you've got to do is basically believe in the fact that you have to recognize the fact that everybody's maybe wrong on a few things, that people who disagree with you aren't necessarily evil, that
you mean other people, not me.
That okay. Even if you are absolutely omniscient right now because you have all the right answers on everything, at some point in your life you
godlike,
that didn't make you evil, right? So so it's okay to talk to people who are on a journey because that's what you've been on.
I was on a journey until I arrived at my final form, which is what I believe this very second. Not next week. Next week I will have gone off the rail. But right now, in this moment, the pinnacle of correctness.
Yes, and people, obviously, we all feel that we're correct. Right. Whenever we put out our views, but we forget, and this does relate to the hacking, the process by which minds are made up. We forget the process by which we got there. We forget, for example, that although we experience ourselves as believing certain things, especially in politics, for the reasons, the logical reasons, the factual reasons we give when we're, let's say, having a Facebook argument trying to convince somebody else to agree with us, what we forget is that. What we forget is that maybe we were exposed to our current opinion by somebody who we trusted, right? Now, trust in the source of information or in the source of an argument is a massive driver in whether we actually end up believing the argument, right?
Probably the biggest one.
Yes, arguably it is. So if you can remind people of that, like I just did there, even though people will still experience themselves as believing what they believe for the reasons they think they believe it, and believing they're right every day. If you remind them of that, they go, "Oh yeah," and it knocks them out of that dogmatic space,
right,
that kind of cognitively impositional space. But there's more to, and there's other things like that. So in this new brand, one of the principles is the idea that that I measure my compassion by the good that I do, not just the strength of my intentions. Now, a lot of folks who aren't on the left will
say that again, because that's a big deal. What you just said. Say that one more time.
I measure my compassion by the good that I do, not the strength of my intentions.
That's a big one. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, but again, whether you're conservative, libertarian, progressive, none of the above, most people will buy that. You can say that to them and they'll go, yeah, you know what? I experience myself as, being compassionate because of my intentions. But yes, I recognize that at the end of the day, if I am passionately, well-intendedly advocating for eating babies and eating babies doesn't actually do any good, then there is a moral responsibility on me to stop advocating for it, right? That the fact that I felt really strongly about that yesterday isn't actually a justification for maintaining that view. So there are certain things that, like that you're basically simply signing up to without conceding any policy, as I say, or any political view, by declaring that you are an H, which is what I'm going to call it for now. One
of our viewers has described it as Principal H.
Principal H.
So we're going to go with that. Principal H.
Principal H. Thank you to whoever that was.
Chris Reynolds, attorney at law, who is very often, ironically, he's also the ongoing sponsor of the Muddied Waters of Freedom. Chris Reynolds, attorney at law, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hate minute. Not Principal H not being applied in that situation. But he did name it, so this is now his thing too. So.
Okay, Principal H. I like that as a. Is that like a holding name for it? Yes.
It's a placeholder name. Yeah, it's a placeholder name.
Yeah, placeholder name. That's great. So there's a few. So libertarians might like this one. First do no harm works in politics too. Now that's quite a libertarian idea. First do no harm, right? Again, where is the moral burden? But progressive conservatives will say yes, that is a value, right? So again, I'm taking the ideology out. It's meta-ideological. It's meta-political. And it's a positive statement of what not doing tribalism, polarization, and divisiveness looks like. It's not just complaining about those things. It's the positive opposite. That's what Principal H is all about. So, so basically, this name, it's the power of the word, right? It's like Blue Republican. Literally, just by writing one article and coining the phrase Blue Republican, all over the world, and that's literally true, all over the world, people identify as Blue Republicans. I met a guy, I might have told you this before, over lunch in Belgium, in Leuven, Belgium, who, in the course of a conversation, discovered I was the Blue Republican guy and told me he'd got on a plane to New Hampshire to hand out Blue Republican leaflets. Now,
oh wow,
that happened because this identity allowed people to know that they weren't the only one who felt this way, right? There were a bunch of them. They were Team Blue Republican. And this is a new team, Team H, right? So you can be Democrat, Republican, but you can all be on Team H. And again, that's not why this is going to work. That's not the only reason. Another fundamental reason why this is going to work, if I can get the exposure that this is going to need, is because there's enough people right now out there already feeling it, right? I'm not having to convince them. They're already feeling it. They just need somebody to put into words the thing that's going to make them go, oh, yes, that's it. That's what I've been feeling. Yes, 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 right?
Right.
And so it's, and that's important. If I'd done this at another time, it wouldn't have the power. Just like Blue Republican at another time would have been meaningless. It's a statement.
That was a very unique time for that because you had a situation where someone who transcended the standard left-right narrative, who had actually made it to the stage of, he he barely registered, but he actually made it to the debate stage, and people were talking about him, and he had ads on TV, and he was a legit candidate. Who a hardcore right-wing Republican could find every bit as much in him as a hardcore left-wing Democrat could, that they agreed with, even if there were other parts of it that they either didn't agree with or found, scary, or, were maybe, neither here nor there on. Ron Paul, he transcended a lot of that because he was a libertarian, and that brand applied to Bob Dole or just voting Republican in the 2002 midterms or whatever. It wouldn't have fit during those times.
Right. The blue Republican brand wouldn't have made sense.
Blue Republicanism would not have made sense for standard issue.
It wouldn't have been substantive. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So that's it. And an important point about this identity thing, which you broached early on, is that you've got to, if you do identify something and you've got friends who identify with that thing, you won't do anything where people that you care about might feel that you're betraying them or betraying your principles that you hold together. And so, the solution. So for today, if I'm a Republican that wants more civil discourse and more effective discourse with a Democrat, I need some way of being able to talk to a Democrat without all my Republican buddies that I still like, who I still want to work with politically, whatever it might be, thinking I've gone to the dark side, right? And that's the importance of having the transcending new brand or identity. So, the reason Blue Republican was important was I could be a Democrat, Blue Republican, and go to my Democrat friends and say, look, I'm still a progressive. I still believe in liberal principles. I'm in the Republican Party. I'm not of it, right? I'm a blue Republican, not on the dark side. And so, this is why branding is so important politically. This is why political identity, why in a way, all politics are the politics of identity. I've got a unit in my, a couple of units in my Weapons of Mass Persuasion course, understanding the sense in which that's true. All politics in some way are the politics of identity. I don't mean man, woman, gender, left, right.
But it's still an identity. It may be individual identities or an ideological identity, but it's an identity. It's tribalism, team sports, whatever you want to call it. It is absolutely identity based. They have found their home, and you're attacking their home. Get away from my home.
Right. In many cases, that's exactly right. And so you have to understand how that operates, which again is what the program is about. So this, like Blue Republican, was designed for that purpose at that time. This Principle H is designed for this time and the major fundamental problem in American politics. And by the way, for libertarians, there is a political open goal, or a meta-political open goal right now, which is this disaffection with mainstream politics. And the way that you succeed when there's mass disaffection with mainstream politics, and I've written articles about this and I've done speeches about this, is you reflect back the feeling of disaffection to the disaffected majority, right? Or large disaffected minority. You don't tell them what you think ideologically, right? This is how the Brexit Party won in 45 days, right? They didn't go around trying to convert anybody on any ideology. There is no ism in the Brexit Party, right? Well, obviously there is a philosophical basis, obviously. I mean, here I am as a liberty guy. I'm all about the Brexit Party, right? But they're not saying, right, let me explain to you sound money. No. The hook is your liberty has been taken away by people that don't give a damn about self-determination and your right to choose your representation. And you're really pissed off about it because you've been lied to. And guess what? You have been lied to. And guess what? That's completely shit and unacceptable. That's how you bring people over to you politically. Then when they're listening to you because they're thinking, this guy kind of sees the world, feels the world like I do, then that guy's going to be interested in your ideology. Then they're going to start asking you questions about policy. And then when they start asking you questions, they're telling you, what you now tell me about what you believe, I will be disposed to accept because I now trust you morally. I identify with you enough that not only am I not threatened by wherever you're coming from, I think I'm going to like it, and it might answer some of my concerns because I see you share my concerns.
Right.
So again, Nigel Farage is one of the best people in politics in the English-speaking world at this. And
not only is he good at this, I mean, Brexit Party, like you said, in 45 days. Now it kind of is from the ashes of the UKIP or whatever, but the UK Independence Party, but not. I mean, it didn't exist 2 months ago. And It is against a headwind of major media and what we're told is popular opinion that, Brexit is about, nativism and thinly veiled racism.
Was a hard right conservative, right?
Yeah, fascism, and this is about destroying our destroying the future of Europe and throwing the UK back into the dark ages, and this is how world wars start, as all this crap, and yet the polls always show. Brexit always outperforms the polls because people feel browbeaten into not publicly sharing this. And yet, just to prove your point, they're browbeaten, and they go, yeah, well, I guess I'm in favor of Remain, or they just don't answer. And they go, well, I'm not really sure what I think. And then they show up to the poll and they vote Brexit or vote, yes on Brexit for the referendum, which was not supposed to win. That was, we talk about, so Donald Trump, we talk about the fact that the polls showed he wasn't going to win, but yet in those last couple weeks, it showed that he was going to do roughly what he did, which was come about 2% short of the popular vote. And the good pollsters were saying, hey, look, that means he could win the Electoral College by a slim margin, which he did. With Brexit, right up to the end, they were saying Brexit's going to lose. Brexit is going to lose. And it won because of basically your principle being applied by one side and the opposite being applied of, well, do you support Brexit or do you support Remain, or how would or are you a xenophobe? Yeah, are you a racist homophobe who wants to erase trans people? And people go, well, I don't want to do all that, so I guess I'm Remain. But yet the Brexit people are saying, hey, look, you've been lied to. You may not agree with us on everything, but we all have to agree that this isn't, that this isn't a good thing that's happened, and we need to get out of it. And people are like, I'm going to quietly agree with you. And that's a perfect example of that. Chris Reynolds says, the H is the answer. We'll definitely get the Dems and Republicans to stop the fighting. That's what we hope for. He also said, well put, Robin. We've all been lied to. That's a good common ground. Hard to get agreement on that, though. And that's the problem, which we'll talk about.
Well, now, just to be clear, to his point, the being lied to is very stark in the UK right now, right? That has legs. That can be at the core of a political campaign in the UK following the Brexit debacle in a way that it couldn't be in the US. We're being lied to all the time in the US, but we're being lied to. All politicians are lying to us all the time anyway. In that kind of low grade level.
It's a more abstract thing, right.
Yeah, but this was just like, we will honor. Yeah, you're gonna have a vote. We're gonna honor it. Oh no, we won't. It's so black and white.
Yeah.
And so the sense of injustice, which I again, this is a big thing in political persuasion. You got to speak to the disaffection, and the best type of disaffection is raw injustice, human, non-ideologically mediated injustice. It's so raw and stark that that's really the kind of the substantial.
It's a visceral, like, we said we'd do this.
Yeah.
We did the opposite of this.
Yeah.
Vote for us again anyway, as opposed to sort of the political machinations of, promising this in degrees and then it's a complete, like the build the wall fiasco is like, he said he's going to build the wall. He's still saying he's going to build the wall. He's kind of saying he's going to build the wall. A little bit of the wall's been built, but it's not like he said he'd build the wall and then said, I'm not building the wall, screw the wall. And then, so it's not as black and white a thing. Right.
Yeah. I made a point in my latest article, which I wrote in April about the Brexit thing. And I called it, in the mother of parliaments, this is how democracy dies. That I put it this way, and I haven't seen anybody else put it this way, but the truth is that Parliament actually criminalized the implementation of the result of the referendum. They actually criminalized it. Like, you can't make that shit up. It's not only are we not going to honor the referendum, we're going to make it illegal to do so. I mean, like, that's some serious messed up
Have you
stuff.
got a license for that Brexit? That's the standard joke. That's the joke about, with British, do you have a license for my horrible British accent? But you got a license for that Brexit?
So, so it's, interesting times.
Yes.
But, the thing that galls me, and I spend a lot of time, obviously, my main fight is for liberty in the United States. That's where I've made my home. But seeing what Farage can do, basically following the exact recipe that I've laid out for the Libertarian Party time and time again, and knowing that there's a massive political open goal here in the US right now, and that there's nobody walking through it. And in a way, my Project H is the beginnings of doing that, although I don't have the resources of an actual political party. But it's galling to me because I'm seeing the wasted opportunity. I mean, today on my Facebook feed, I noticed something from the Libertarian Party. The level that they're at is, what kind of tote bag do you prefer? I'm like, I mean, is that where
is this what we're doing today? Yeah.
I'm just like, meanwhile, Farage, I mean, you couldn't have a better case study. It's going on right now in a country where they speak the same language, right? I mean, it's
not even that far away. It's really not even that far away. If you look at the world in general, it's what New York to London is roughly the same as New York to Los Angeles, right?
It's not a lot in it. I mean, it's not a lot in it.
Yeah, so
you can do that flight in 5 hours.
Yeah, across the pond is a real thing. It is literally across, and the more narrow part of the pond too. And yet here we are. So just break down the tote bag argument, because I completely missed this. What we don't want to devote too much time to this, but give me 40 seconds of what.
I don't want to upset people. I mean, I've seen this in organizations that I've worked with, nonprofits, right? Where, I'm the marketing guy, I'm the communications guy, right? So somebody sends me, we should get bags and pens and blah, and blah, and blah. And I'm like, why? How many minds are going to change? Well, I was like, no. How many minds are going to change? Like,
from a libertarian pen, right?
How many does it get? Like, show me the data. If you can show me that 100 tote bags is one vote, I'm interested. But if you just are doing it because you can't think of anything else to do, then I know exactly what I can spend that money on, and I can guarantee that it will move minds. But having a tote bag doesn't move a mind. Now, you can say, but it keeps the brand and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. Look, you know what? If I start, I will just go off, and I'll be the libertarian John Pye again. So,
which is great. Listen,
I'm back, man.
Yeah, exactly. So people loved it. So if you want to start listen, the more you get like that, the people want this.
Really important.
I know. You come here to talk. Yeah, Principal H, you morons. So dialing back, one thing that struck me and why I had you on the first time, besides the fact that I love your writing and I love your reasoning, we don't agree exactly on how libertarian is. You're not completely correct on libertarianism, as I am.
Well, I'm not Spike, so how could I?
Yeah, you're not Spike level libertarian. But to be fair, who is besides me?
Only Spike.
Only I could do that. But so. What I liked about you is, and what you're doing is, it was at the same time that I was getting into stoicism, and instead of reacting to what people do and say, going internal and saying, well, why did I react that way? Why did I have that kind of reaction to this? And this is sort of stoicism applied to politics. And so an example of that is.
So let me see self-awareness, if I may. I mean, because stoicism has a connotation that I don't think you need to. I know what you're saying, but
Yeah.
Stoicism has this kind of connotation of inner strength, of inner assertion, that I actually, and that you do need that, because you need some inner strength to self-observe, right? When you're in an argument politically, let's say, and you want to go at the thing that the person said that was wrong, and you do need some kind of self-control, which is what Stoicism is about, to stop yourself reacting. In other words, to be changed not by what comes at you, but by what comes from you. That all has flavors of Stoicism. But I actually, in many ways, I think of myself much more as like a hedonist or an Epicurean. Yet, I am about this self-awareness bit. There is a minimum of self-control that I think what I'm about requires. But I just don't think it's I guess what I'm saying is it's not as hard as all that. It's not as hard as Stoicism. It's just getting bored of losing all the time, or being ineffective, right? Like that's a bit of work, but it's not a ton of work because the payoff is so immediate. Right. It's not like self-flagellation. It's not like, going without.
No. You're not deconstructing who you are as a person. Yeah, I mean, I'm going through a journey that you don't necessarily have to go through to apply this, but this is part of that. And one thing I noticed was when I sort of became an anarchist, because before that I was sort of more of a libertarian leaning conservative, and then as I was kind of really questioning the state and the whole thing, what I found is that I actually now, even though my belief system is far further from the, what Tom Woods calls the, 3x5 card of allowable opinion, or what some people call the Overton window or whatever. Now that, even though it's further outside of it, I'm actually slightly more relatable to some people, or they're more open to hearing what I have to say, because now they approach it from like almost like a curiosity, like, well, what even is that? As opposed to when I would say, well, I'm kind of a libertarian leaning Republican, and they'd hear libertarian or Republican, and unless a Republican would hear libertarian and they go, oh, you mean like those Ron Paul idiots that want the terrorists to win? Or a Democrat who's just like, oh, you mean so that everyone's dying in the streets so that the rich people can be, 20% richer or whatever. And now when I'm like, I'm an anarchist, I still get people that are like, oh, so you want to, throw Molotov cocktails at innocent people or whatever. But for the most part, people are almost more like, well, what's that about? And one thing I found is when I'm around a bunch of conservatives just dunking on, progressives, liberals, I tend to find myself sticking up for liberals / saying, well, you guys kind of do that too when it comes to this. And then when liberals are doing the same thing, bashing conservatives, I find myself kind of going, well, you guys kind of do that too. And conservatives actually don't want people to die. What I've learned is, why don't I maybe do that when I'm talking to a conservative? Instead of immediately putting my, anarchist fight the state at all costs hackles up, why not approach this the same way I approached liberals talking about this conservative and say, this guy doesn't, this, person, guy, woman, whatever, doesn't mean ill. They just, I disagree with how they're going to do it, but they don't actually want bad things to happen. They want good things to happen. They're actually very passionate about wanting good things to happen, and I need to have a conversation with them about what that means, as opposed to just beating them over the head and calling them a bootlicker or whatever.
Right, and to put something specific on what you've just said, if you can translate the good intentions of a conservative to a liberal, that means, let's say, you can understand the liberal's worldview better than if you couldn't do that. Now, given that you can understand the liberal's worldview enough to translate the conservative, let's say, preferred policies into liberal speak, right? To explain to a liberal, okay, here's why the policies don't actually mean what it looks like they mean to you from your liberal paradigm, but that they actually can also come out of a good intention. But in a way, let's say, applied differently, or filtered differently through a different experience of the world. If you can do that, then necessarily that understanding of the liberal can enable you to better persuade the liberal of your anarchist views. Because it's the same,
absolutely.
same understanding you're using. And one of the ways I put that in my training is, look, if you want to sell, product P to person X, you better understand person X better than you understand product P.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's all about selling. It has nothing. Yeah. That person's not primarily concerned about your product. They're concerned about themselves and the people they care about. And if you come to them relating it to how, if you look at an ad for something, it usually starts with, do you have this problem? Well, let me tell you about blah, 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 blah. You're not able to have a conversation with someone with an ad, but you can try to relate to them in that, 15 to 30 seconds that you have. When I did my little plug for Anchor FM, I start by saying, are you looking to do a podcast? Well, let me tell you, knowing what it's like to have to deal with podcasting, let me tell you why I think Anchor FM is a good idea for a podcast. This is technically not a second plug, but I'll get paid. I will accept the money from Anchor FM if they decide it's a second plug, but it's not. But relating to you have this issue or problem or need this solution. Well, here's something that can help with that, and that's sort of what you're saying, applying it to politics. Now, let me ask you this.
And by the way, what I was saying earlier about reflecting back the feeling of injustice, that is doing this in politics. That thing you just said, the reflecting back the injustice, that the felt injustice, is the letting someone know that you feel their pain, that you get their problem, the thing they need to solve. And if you successfully do that, and they go, I identify with this person, there's that word identification again.
Yeah.
Right. Then whatever solution you give them in the next paragraph is the one they're going to be most likely to believe.
Yep. It's why Donald Trump, it's why a billionaire who in no way relates to the average person, and not just because he's a billionaire. Right. There's a myriad of reasons why he is nothing like pretty much anyone else. But he started his campaign by saying, I know you're worried about X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to do something about it. And putting aside what you think about, again, I'm not a fan, and most people watching this are not a fan, or are fans to various degrees, or they may like that he owns the left, but they don't really like what he does other than owning the left. The man related to people, to blue-collar workers. This is a guy that outsources and hires immigrants, but he still went to people and said, look, you're worried about this. No one else is talking about it in any real way, and I'm going to do something about it.
Okay, and of course, so this is an important principle of political persuasion, of scoring a political open goal, and I have said it in these terms to the LP time and time again. And this is what Nigel Farage does. If you want to actually create a massive insurgency in a short period, a ballot box, that the injustice that you reflect back to someone has to simultaneously be an injustice that all of the mainstream political options are seen as making worse, right?
Yeah, right.
So all of the mainstream options for Brexit are not solving the problem, they're making it worse. They're frustrating Brexit. So that's a political open goal. The Donald Trump example is a really good one, and I use this example too. You remember, I don't know if we mentioned this, Spike. You can stop me if I mentioned this in the show, last show we did, number 19. But that time when Donald Trump said about the Mexicans not sending their good men, they're sending the rapists, et cetera, et cetera. And do you remember that?
We may have talked about. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, I don't think.
I'm going to talk about it now. Okay. You remember, like that week, all of the media, immediately, all of the media went, it's over now. It's over now.
Yes.
He's not going to win. And that week, he was top of the Republican pack, right?
Yep.
So let me decode that for you, right? What people heard when he said they're not sending the best men in immigration, we got to stop this, blah, 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 it isn't fair that people who break rules get stuff that people like you who don't break rules don't get.
Yep.
That is what all the blue collar people who were like, I don't know about this immigration thing, maybe it's complicated, but I know this thing's not fair, right?
Yep.
That was what they heard. And that is what he meant. Yep. And you can argue about the actual, because he's Donald Trump and he says all kinds of rubbish.
right.
The actual specifics of how many rapists and are they sending rapists and the more Mexicans.
Of course, you can argue it all. Yeah, of course.
The point. And the fact was, like, you could go back, check it out. What the media said that week and what happened to the polls. Because he went to the top of the pile and now he's in the White House. And And the point being that immigration, more than any other topic, is one that everybody knows both parties consistently have not solved, have got in the way of solving, have kept saying one thing and not delivering, right? So, and it's like you can take it out of a textbook. Like, but I'm just waiting for real liberty folks in America to just do some of this. I just I'm ready to help, but
it's tough for the reason that I'm and I'm guilty of this as well. We are an ideology driven group, and many of us, I'm not one of them, but many people within libertarianism like the fact that it is fringe. Whether they consciously know that or not, they maybe have always been on the outside. This is a group of outsiders, and they sort of want... Looking at how Larry Sharp called himself an anarchist. He's been on my show, and he said, I'm an anarchist at heart. I live in New York. We're nowhere near anarchy. We have to take steps. People were less upset about that than they were about the fact that he was like a cool, relatable guy. Now, some of them, yes, were very upset on ideological grounds. You're talking about giving $20,000 per student or whatever. How is that libertarianism? And he explained it, because the alternative is spending several times more for garbage. And I'm presenting a something to I guess yellow pill people into libertarianism. But a lot of people, they just didn't like that he was like more like a standard issue politician or a standard issue person that was relatable and wasn't, politics first and was actually trying to build relationships and things like that. And so there was this sort of aversion to like popularity. And so you're fighting that to some extent too.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fine too. I mean, it's not an either or proposition, right?
No, of course, of course.
You can have both. You can have, we need both, right? It's fine to want to be fringe, to be in it for lots of personal reasons. And this goes to my, or reasons of personality. And this goes to my earlier point that we think the reasons we believe things are the reasons we give to justify them in an argument. But that's not the reason we actually came to the conclusion. The reasons we actually come to the conclusion include many kind of subconscious things, many things to do with personality, to do with trust. Our biography, the experiences we've had and the people we've met and what people said when and all these. There are other factors that operate on a different level. So that's all there. But I mean, some of the people who get upset when others don't do it their way. I mean, part of that can be that. Well, if we all behave like that, then not only are we not fringe, we're not separate, and we're not superior. It's almost like we're coming down to the level. We're giving too much respect, too much credibility. But, in any movement, you're going to have all kinds of these folks. But the point is that who's running the ship, right? The point is that are the people who don't want to actually be effective, who have, let's say, a personal interest in the group with which they identify not being effective, are they dominating or are they part of the bigger picture? Are they frustrating the vehicle or just a part of the vehicle? I mean, and the fact is that, I mean, again, stating a principle unequivocally isn't the same as acting on principle. Those two things are different. Stating a clear commitment to an end destination, the ideal world, and a clear commitment to it is not the same as believing that necessarily the only way to get to it is in one step, right? They're completely different things. They don't follow from each other. And in fact, the last thing I said is obviously patently false. And you can show that it's false, not just historically, you can show logically that it's false. And actually, I wrote an article. It's one of the most academic things I've ever written, doing just that, called Purism Isn't Principled in an Impure World. And it's one of the most careful things I've ever written. We could do a whole show on it.
Not the title as much as the actual thing. But no, exactly. And that's the thing. It's and again, I'm an anarchist like hardcore. I mean, there are a lot of people that call themselves anarchists, and then you scratch the surface and there's still some. So I literally just don't want any government. And then once we don't have a state, I want us to then examine a lot of the hierarchies that we have and ask, are these hierarchies we actually want, or are they hierarchies that are born of the state? So, I mean, I really want to break down a lot of stuff, even post-state. With that said, I understand that the person living on this side of me in the house over here will explain to you why we need, I probably shouldn't do that, because I don't want people to then figure out which neighbor I'm talking. Neighbors, well, you don't know which wall. You don't know which wall this is, but a neighbor in my neighborhood will explain to you why, separating children from their, families at the border is absolutely necessary, and then you'll have someone else explain why, like, it should be illegal. That I should be paying all of my workers at least $15 an hour, and and then someone else why they think healthcare is a right, and then someone else, why, and these, these aren't stupid people. This is a nice affluent neighborhood, but we're so outside of what even a moderate libertarian or even a Ron Paul would be talking about, or even a Larry Sharp. That's so far outside of what people are even thinking that you definitely have to even just try to relate to them. Now, let me, you mentioned abortion, and before I let you go, I want to kind of end on talking about really how this applies when the rubber hits the road. So abortion is a perfect example of a true wedge issue, a true, like, there is very little common ground. Very few people talk about, being moderate in abortion, even though the reality is most people are probably moderate in abortion. They just aren't allowed to signal that. You've got one side that says that so we'll start with the pro-choice crowd, and I'll use the terms that they use. The pro-choice crowd that says, that this is my body, or a woman's body, and it's her choice. And the people that want to criminalize abortion at any level, I'm going with the most extreme interpretation. The people that want to criminalize abortion even up until birth, what they're really saying is they want to control my body. They think I'm the property of their property and the property of the government. And this is a throwback to the white male patriarchy that says that everything belongs to me and I can tell everyone what to do. So that's one extreme. Then the other extreme is the pro-life side that says that even saying that it's okay to do sex selective, where they're selecting from embryos which one that they want. So not even just abortion at even the earliest stage, but pre-implantation. I don't know the term. Pre-implantation. Anything in which a conceived embryo, zygote, whatever is being terminated is an assault on human life and dignity, and it's a throwback to, it's murder. They say it's murder. It's murder, and it's a throwback to any other genocide or attempt to dehumanize a human. And both sides have valid arguments to make, and ultimately what they're arguing over is when personhood begins, but they're too busy throwing hyperbole at each other and screeching at the other about how they want horrible things for all of humanity, to ever actually get into the discussion, which is, when does personhood begin? Because that's truly, if we really pull back, that argument is, if X is where personhood begins, then X minus anything prior to X is, it's a woman's body, she can do whatever she wants with it. And anything after X is, this is no longer just a woman's body. There's now another human being involved, and we have to consider that human being and any rights that we think that woman has, the human being also has. That is the actual discussion to be had. I consider myself pro-life to the extent... Go ahead.
I'm going to say it's actually more than that, because there's a paradox, the name of which I forget, but I used it in an article where I actually discussed this very thing. Which is this. When do you have a pile of sand? Right? 1 grain, is that a pile? No. 10 grains? No. Okay. 1 million grains? Yes. Okay. So do you have a pilot 500,000?
Right.
Is that the number? Are we really saying that 499,000 isn't? And then no, that doesn't make sense. So in that case, there can be no piles, right? Because you can't draw the line. Well, clearly that isn't the case. So again, there's a more philosophical problem here, where the idea, there's assumption going here that you can't have two things unless you can define a boundary between them. That itself is questionable. And so I'm just raising that. By the way, please, I'm so glad we're having this discussion, because one of my best articles I wrote last year was called The Mistake You Make in Every Political Argument.
Yes.
And I used the abortion one as a very kind of detailed case study. I mean, I can go on, but
no, and it is not and the problem is, it not only is a flashpoint and it has a lot of logical fallacies built into it. We're talking about human beings and when we start to live. Another one is age of consent. So almost all of us agree that it's not right for a 50-year-old to have sex with a 3-year-old. You're going to find maybe less than 0.1% of people that think that that's acceptable in any way. Almost everyone agrees that it is perfectly fine for an 18-year-old to have sex with a 17-and-a-half-year-old. Right? Like, I mean, almost. Again, you'll find some people are like, no, unless it's the exact age of kid. But almost everyone in a consensual act, and some may say, well, they have to be married. Okay, fine, then they have to be married. But the actual ages, so long as whatever other precepts you have about when sex is acceptable have been met, 18 and 17 and a half are okay. Most of us agree that it's wrong for a 25-year-old to have sex with a 12-year-old. Okay? Most of us agree. You're now going to have a slightly larger number of people that go, well, if this, blah, blah, blah. But most of us agree, including me, that it's okay. Most of us agree it's okay for a 19-year-old to have sex with a 17-year-old. Most of us probably disagree that it's okay for a 20-year-old to have sex with a 15-year-old. Most of us agree. Yeah. And you can go, where is that line, both in terms of the older person and the younger person? And if you even try to broach this subject, people are like, wait a second, especially if they have kids. They're like, kids of any age, even if they're adults at this point. Have this conversation with a parent, man, they immediately are, wait a second, are you about to defend pedophilia? And it's like, no, I'm asking you. And that's why I started just asking. I would say, well, when do you think it is? Well, what are you trying to say? I'm not trying to say anything. When do you think it is? Because I honestly don't even know. And I would say that I don't know. I know that I have no interest in teenagers to begin with. So I certainly, this is not a, me trying
discussion. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, this is truly it's academic and it's an important one too. But this is not me trying to mess with your teenager. I have zero interest at all. I'm not, at this point, you really have to impress me even in your mid-20s before I'm almost 40. I'm not one of these looking for a young, well, first of all, I'm married, but even if I wasn't, so that's not me. It's not me, but it's a serious discussion to be had. But if you try to have it, people are like, whoa. Are you about to, especially if you tell them you're a libertarian, they're like, wait a second, I've heard about the whole, what if the child consents things? What are you about to do? And abortion's a similar thing where you're talking about something that is an incredibly nuanced thing to talk about. And yet people are, because it's such a visceral thing, people have drawn their lines in the sand. How do you apply what we call the Chris Reynolds attorney at law principle H to this, to this thing? How would you apply that? Let's say you're and I don't know let's say that you're a very extreme pro-choicer and I'm a very extreme pro-lifer. How do you approach that discussion with me using this principle?
I told you about the article that I wrote called The Mistake You Make in Every Political Argument.
Right.
The follow-up article to that was called How Facts Get Chosen and Minds Get Changed. And I could give you a long answer to what you said. And in fact, the long answer is in that second article. Precisely the long answer is in that second article. But the general point in answer to your question is that we have visceral, we've used the word visceral a few times on the show, viscerally felt moral intuitions. And what you need to do is, if you're having an argument about age of consent or abortion or whatever, is to actually get directly down to the driving moral intuition of the person that you're arguing with. You've got to be able to find it and feel it, and then you can acknowledge it. Most of the time when it comes to these kind of issues, most people aren't aware, they couldn't articulate to themselves the feeling, the viscerally felt moral intuition that they experience essentially as an argument, right? So
you're saying they can't articulate that.
No. Most people are not even aware, let alone able to articulate the viscerally felt moral intuition that determines which facts about the world they believe, right? Say again?
No, I was saying no, they can't. They definitely cannot. They probably don't, like you said, they don't even know, much less articulate. It's coming from a very, very innate part of them. Yeah.
Right. So when you're dealing with this, which is kind of like the hardest application of things we're talking about.
Yes.
Right? Which is why you went to it. I get it.
Right, exactly,
You need to actually find the intuition that the person you're speaking to may not have found themselves. Now, you can do this because even if you are a pro-choice person, let's say, you can, knowing what the pro-life position is, it's murder, you can think yourself into, let's say even imagine a situation which you don't think applies in the abortion case, but your interlocutor does, where you're horrified by murder. You can imagine a murder, right?
Yes.
You can imagine what it would be like if you really believed that this zygote with 4 cells was a human being. My God, you'd feel the same way. You would be
millions of them being killed every single year.
Yes. And not only that, you wouldn't think that the pro-life person is evil for interfering with your body. You'd think the pro-life person is morally derelict for not actually burning down every abortion clinic, preventing every murder. It's like, how is it if you believe that, you're not out there? How can you even live with all the mass murder going on?
Correct.
Now,
yes,
you can, when you understand that this kind of stuff is driven by viscerally felt moral intuition that really doesn't get words except when you're putting the words on the facts that you believe about the world, and your intuition causes you to choose facts, right? In other words, this zygote is a human being. This zygote is just a collection of cells that obviously isn't a human being because it doesn't have any of the characteristics of a human being. Both of those two positions are reasonable within the respective paradigms, and you can find ways to access the intuition. And when it comes to things like this, that's what you have to do. And I actually give concrete examples of how you might do that. Now, in the article. Now, here's an interesting one. I'm not saying this is the best. It's just the first one that comes to my mind, right?
Okay.
Imagine. So I used to be very religious. I am no longer. But I know a bit about the Bible and the liturgy and that kind of thing. And so it was interesting to me that many of the, let's say, pure pro-life people in the United States have a religious basis for that view. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of them they would self-identify, let's just say Christian. Now, so I get it, right? I completely understand that.
Well, they believe that they believe God knit them in the womb. Christians and Jews, from our book, from the actual book, and to a lesser extent Muslims. Muslims are actually more nuanced on this issue, believe it or not. But Christians and Jews in particular believe that God knit them in the womb at the very moment of conception, that they were fearfully made in that moment. Well, if that's the case, you can't kill that.
Well, here's the thing. Yes, maybe, but there are Bible verses to the contrary. And interestingly, I mean, again, I was just going to pull this out as an interesting example.
Yeah.
Slam dunk. But the liturgy, the original liturgy, like the Anglican liturgy, it says, we believe he will come again to judge the quick and the dead.
Quick and the dead, right? Yep.
Quick and the dead. Not the conceived and the dead, not even the living and the dead, which is the modern bastardization, but the quick and the dead. And the quick has a very specific meaning, right? The quickening is when the woman first feels the presence of the baby in the womb. Now, I'm not saying therefore, right, pro-choice, right? But what I am saying, what you can do by getting into the paradigm within which those intuitions live, right, of your opponents. If you say something like that, you don't say, hey, look, I got you. You say, okay, well, this is interesting.
What does this mean? Yeah, exactly. Right.
What is this? What, is that about anything? Is there anything here to consider? Now, there's many things you can do like that on both sides. And I outline many in that second article. And the article, by the way, how facts get chosen and mind gets changed, is about the general point of our moral universes determine or correlate with our moral intuitions that drive our political views via determining the facts that we believe about the world, not the values we have about them. Now, this is really interesting. When we're having the abortion argument, somebody's saying, you're a murderer, right? And somebody's saying, you're trying to control my body. But here's the thing. If you actually take it out of the abortion argument and you just say to both sides of that, are you okay with murder? They both say no. If you say to both sides, are you okay with imposing on inside the bodies of other people? They both say no, right?
No.
So it's not the values that have the disagreement, even though it feels like a disagreement of values when we're having the abortion discussion. It's actually, to your earlier point, a disagreement about facts. In this case, what is a human being? What is a person? Yeah. But then, so the critical question becomes, how are the facts determined? Well, they're determined by viscerally felt moral intuitions. So you have to go to those. And that's the deep art of this. But now
facts don't care about your feelings. Facts are rooted in your feelings. Not always. 1 + 1 is 2, regardless of how you feel about it.
Experience is true. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's something called the Humean divide. The Humean. Is it called the divide? Something like that. Which is that you can't get to an ought from an is, right? You can't get to an ought from an is. This is an important thing in philosophy, moral philosophy, right? That whatever you believe about the material world can never determine your moral values. So said Hume, and a lot of paper has been, written on about this. However,
Hume's law.
No, it's got another name. But yes, whatever. But the fact is, neurologically, we're actually wired, right? So ironically, there's a physical basis, not only from deriving an ought from an is, but we actually, in another way, derive is from the ought, in a way. And you've got to understand that. And so as I say, I've mentioned that article a ton of times now, but it's all in there. It's all in there.
Well,
and dare I say, it's quite a sophisticated article.
Yeah, and if you shoot that over to me, we'll put it in the notes. And of course, if you go to robinkoerner.com, you can see all of this stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example of the problem with talking religion, politics, even sports, like really talking like stuff with people, especially people that aren't into talking about this stuff, is that they're very quickly gonna the less and it's worse the less they have actually spent the time fleshing it out, the more likely they are to immediately fall back on that intuition of this is right, you're wrong, and not just you're wrong, you're attacking me. Like you are actually attacking what I believe, and and not just what I believe, but for example, in abortion, you're attacking the babies, or you're attacking the women, or
what could be worse, right?
Yeah, you're a murderer. In both cases, more and more I'm seeing in the pro-choice crowd, they're saying well, you're a murderer if you're pro-life, because they're still going to try to get abortions, and now they're going to die. And women are going to die as a result of your pro-life, your anti-choice activism is going to result in women dying, therefore you're a murderer. And, in the immigration debate, any of these debates, and I struggle not to do it because I'm an anarchist. I think the whole thing's murder. Like, taxation's theft, the government's an imposition on our lives. It's hard for me not to tell my dad or my whoever, someone I love and care about and I know doesn't want to be that, like, well, what you're advocating is kind of murdery, but how do you do that without basically telling the person, I think you're a terrible person? And you can't, so you have to come at it from the belief that they are coming from a good place and then go from there.
And let's just be clear. Sometimes there are terrible people, right? I mean, I'm not naive, relativist or anything. But what you can do is you can, a hugely important principle in sales, let alone political persuasion, is to meet the objection up front. And if I know that when I share with you my view, you're going to hear that I think you're a murderer, what I can do is I can preempt that, and I can say, look, I know how this is going to sound to you, but let me just explain why it feels this way to me. I completely get that other people might feel just as strongly and feel the same things about me for other people. Like, you can pack it up. You can own the fact that this is going to sound a bit strange, that actually thinking that somebody's a murderer for their points of view is a lot more sensible and a lot more common than people expect, and therefore we shouldn't actually think it's such a big deal. Like, being doing murder is actually less of a big deal as long as you're not wielding the knife. I'm not saying it's not a big deal, but you see what I mean? I mean, precisely because it does go this way. If you stand on principle about anything, you do quickly get to that point.
The logical conclusion is that someone who disagrees with me a lot is going to cause people to die. And therefore, so even if I don't think they're a murderer, quote unquote, I think that what they're advocating for is going to result in people dying. And let's be clear, right? In a manner of speaking, I was passionate against a bunch of the American wars, right? Second Iraq War and so on and so on. There were people voting to kill babies in Baghdad. I mean, that's true. So from where I sit, okay, well, they're murder. But you know what? We're all doing things that contribute to murder all the time, right? Once you go down there, oh, well, hold on. I'm paying my tax, right? Because I don't want to be put in jail. Because I don't want to be put in jail.
A little bit contributing to murder than actually spend a life in, right? So we're all doing it. So the fact that you can level an accusation that's that terrible against someone doesn't make him any different from you. It's only a matter of degree. It's a matter of quantity, not quality. And the humility that's really the humility that's so important. I mean, with libertarians, we talked about some of the traits that some libertarians have that maybe frustrate effectiveness.
When you called me autistic.
A lot of people will go to an anarchist. I mean, I do this all the time. I'm at these events all the time, right? Where I'll talk to my anarchist friends, and they'll, anything that you advocate that isn't their idea of pure anarchist utopia is essentially, well, some would even say murder or whatever. But whatever it is,
you bootlicker.
But they drove there on a public road. So I'm like, okay. So what are we doing? We're just talking, right? And it's, at the end of the day, being principled is how many of to what extent are you actually prepared to take the pain of acting on your principles rather than compromising it? And we're all, I think it's very hard. I don't know that you can divide the world up into two camps, principled and not principled, based on, grandstanding on statements about anything. I just, show me the perfect.
I think there are definitely people that are truly not principled. I think like a lot of politicians that are just pure cynics. They are just in it for themselves, and there are a lot of people that are like that. I think overall most people have some principle. To speak to your part about public roads, just to clarify for people who may think that you're doing the roads fallacy that, oh, you can't be an anarchist if you use public roads. That's not what he's saying. Because I immediately know where a lot of people are going to go with that. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that you're using public roads is because you don't have another viable option. To get to that thing, you have to use a public road. Unless you want to walk on the shoulder, and then you're still using a public road. There's really not a way other than trespassing over many people's properties, thousands of people's property.
But here's why it's interesting. What you could do is you could try and find private means to find out all of the landowners between where you are and the Libertarian Convention. You could call them all up and get permission, and blah, blah, and you could stay completely true to your principles. And
climb over their fences
right? It kind of makes my point even more strongly. Because who's going to do that?
To some degree, you have sacrificed your most pure version of your principle for the sake of convenience, which I have in my wallet. I have Federal Reserve notes. My God, yes. I mean, even a lot of conservatives are against the Federal Reserve, and yet I'm not like openly trading Bitcoin every day. I have some Bitcoin, but I'm not I'm not exchanging Bitcoin yet because it's not right now viable. So the point he was making is we all to some degree have made an acceptable compromise to us where maybe your kid's in a public school, whatever, that I am doing this even though it goes against my principle and even though I advocate against it and for a better option because at least for now, I don't have a good option. And so if someone takes that a little bit further and says, well, I'm participating in Larry Sharp, I am coming up with a program where we're going to give every kid at $16,000, $20,000 that they can do whatever they want education-wise or use it to start a career or whatever. No, it doesn't meet my principles of how things should be, but it is what I believe to be the best compromise in face of reality. Like you said, an unprincipled world, the reality of what we have now, this is so much better than that. And I don't even necessarily agree with that plan, but I get why he's doing it. I'm not going to call him a bootlicker for it. And that's the point you were making. And I would
go even further, right? You know, if you're going to argue, like he could also make the case, and this case often is a good one to make, is often true, that by making what looks on the surface like something of a compromise, you actually create a situation in which getting to the agreed on final goal, right, the uncompromising goal, is actually easier. So it's not that you compromise there because it's just a step in the right direction and then you stop in a better place, but that it is actually a step toward where you all want to go. So the only argument is, are you getting there in one step or 10, and or is that one of the 10 steps that would get you there or not? Right. Which are practical questions. And this is why in my work, and reasonable people and principled people can disagree in each case on the difference between the two. But in my work, I say, look, you've got to understand the fundamental difference, ironically, the difference in principle between a principled compromise and a compromise of principle. You never do the second, but people can disagree about what the first looks like. And if you want to actually be principled, which means change the world such that your principles are instantiated, you have to discuss the first. You have to. You have to. You have to. Yeah, you have to, and you have to acknowledge that none of us is living purely to principle. Because if we were, for example, as an anarchist, that street right there is a public road. And in order for me to order something using Amazon, I have to participate in taxation through the sales tax. I have to participate in the Federal Reserve by exchanging Federal Reserve notes for that purchase. I have to walk across a public street, and I have to open a mailbox, or open my door. Yeah, bootlicker, and listen, yeah, commie, listen, and voting Bernie, are you?
Yeah, but this is the real Or it's like, so, and this is why a lot of people that are true hardcore anarchists, they become like more, and people in general that the more principled they become, or the more they would call themselves principled they become, the more introvert, they are so disgusted by that. And this happens with a lot of hardcore Christians and people of other religions. They introvert, they get more and more internal because they're so sickened by the world and the thought of compromising to even talk with one of those scumbags. And these are people that often end up killing people because The only way they can interact with the world is to destroy that, as much evil as I can before they take me out. You've done nothing. You've accomplished nothing other than destroying your life, the life of those other people who also thought they were doing the right thing, more than likely. Very few people wake up and go, what evil can I do today? So you're really just harming people that also thought they were doing the right thing. You've accomplished nothing other than making whatever you believe look ridiculous. And you haven't helped anyone. You've done harm. And so that's why I've become I'm not sure I'd call myself a pragmatist to the extent that many people associate pragmatism. I'm still agnostic to the question as to whether or not electoral politics is even an effective way to accomplish change, but it might be. And for those who avidly think that it does, I'm not going to give you a hard time because I'm not 100% sure, but even if I didn't agree with you, I get that you're trying to do something. You're at least as much flack as people give Libertarian Party activists and and any kind of activists in electoral politics. You're trying something. You're trying to do something.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
trying to push the argument somewhere.
That's such a great point, Spike. I mean, it's live and let live, right? I mean, especially for libertarians.
It is.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, I'm fundamentally an epistemic libertarian. The reason I'm into liberty is because whatever else is or isn't true, I don't know enough shit to know better than you what's good for you.
Exactly.
I just believe that the idea that I possibly could is insane, right? So I'm an epistemic libertarian. So given that, I don't see that there's a way to. I personally don't see there's a way to be a consistent libertarian, let alone an anarchist. If I'm, whilst believing that I do know better than everybody on how to accomplish things in this world that has loads of variables,
for themselves,
mind can handle them, right?
And for themselves as individuals. So not just I have the best prescription for society at large or the world at large. I know better than Robin Koerner how Robin Koerner should be living.
No, it's impossible.
Living his life on a day-to-day basis. I, as an anarchist, and follow the logic here, if that's the case, I should be working to control Robin because I know better than Robin how he should be being Robin. I know how to Robin better than Robin. Therefore, and all of you that are, I know how to you better than you. Why am I an anarchist or a libertarian? I should be like a hardcore North Korean communist forcing you to, at every level, to do things if I follow the logic of that. So obviously I don't know.
Actually, some people will be thinking, yeah, but other people do that too, not just libertarians, and they're right.
Everyone does it, yeah.
The reason it's particularly interesting for libertarians, though, is that there's an internal contradiction in philosophically when libertarians do it, that doesn't kind of exist for non-libertarians. And I actually wrote about this years ago when I wrote an article called something like "The Opposite of Tyranny is the opposite of liberty isn't tyranny, it's orthodoxy." And by the way, that's exactly what George Orwell said, but I hadn't realized that when I wrote the article.
The opposite of liberty is orthodoxy. Now, are you saying orthodoxy applied to how you interact with people?
So, but basically, I unpacked it in a more recent article where I said, beware the enlightened, it was called Beware the Enlightened Ones. And I talked about the scientism versus science, right? Orthodoxy in the sense of, this is the truth. I know everything I need to know about the truth. Therefore, I don't need to let your data or your experiences or any of my interactions with the world affect my belief. I can discount that possibility out of the gate because I've already arrived. Now, that is called, in physical sciences, that approach to the world is called scientism. And it's the opposite of science. And it's very interesting to me as a scientist and a philosopher of science that the discipline that we have that unarguably, I would say, has brought us closest to the truth, has made the most moves towards the truth in its own domain, is science, let's say, the physical sciences. And that has done so by having the axiom that everything it knows is false, of knowing that it doesn't know and looking to find where it is wrong. Whereas in politics, what most people do isn't the political analog of that. They do the political analog of scientism, which is, I know I've already arrived, so what I can do is ignore all the data of your experience when you tell me that my libertarian utopia is actually going to be really shit for you. Well, I can just because you don't get it. right? It's like I'm disengaged. Anything you tell me at that point means that you don't get it. Right?
I have achieved the singularity and transcended humanity by knowing all as a God on earth is really what people are saying, and it's what we think about our beliefs, and that's what's so crazy about it is even in this moment, you, Robin Koerner, believe you're right, and as humble as you are, you believe you're right, or else you wouldn't believe it. It's I'm sure there's a paradox name for that too. You can be as humble as soul searching as I am. Love reading stuff I disagree with now. I covet it, and I always look for stuff because because the way I look at it is, if I argue with you and I say I'm right, and you go no, I'm right, and here's how I can prove it, and I can look at that and go, wow, now I'm right, because you've shown me this thing. I'm always I love it, but still in that is that I'm right. Like I'm so right that I'm always more right, But so that's an implied thing, but you can't approach everyone like that, and you can't approach things like that because you're attacking everyone, and it's what you're saying basically.
I mean, and it is super interesting because, like, as a physicist, we know that our physics is wrong. Quantum mechanics and general relativity, which describe the world with amazing precision, are incompatible. We know that what we believe fundamentally is wrong. Literally, it has to be wrong. But it's closer to the truth than anything else, and it's so good that we can get on planes and not lose our lives when they fall out of the sky, right? It's so there's a way of being arbitrarily close to right and acting accordingly whilst knowing you're wrong, and that is actually the reality in which we live, and it is a basis for humility. And it shouldn't be as hard as all of that because there's no other game in town.
And the earth is flat. And the earth is flat.
Yeah, quite.
That is my favorite response to that ever. That is both the most British and my most favorite response to that ever is quite. That's how I'm going to respond to that from now on. That's perfect. So, okay, I love it. I absolutely love it. So, Robin, you are an absolute gem of a human being. I love having you on. I always love having great conversations with you. If I could have a Robin minute on every show where you just came on and blew everyone out, I wish I could. I wish your schedule could afford that. Before I let you go, anything that you haven't had a chance to plug, talk about, any final points you want to make, anything that you want to talk about, I give you the floor for as long as you want. The floor is yours, Robin Koerner.
Well, look, I have just redone my Robin Koerner website a couple of months ago. Haven't really talked about it much. So please go to robinkoerner.com. Whether you're looking for, a speaker, candidate or activist training, work, in the political communication and political persuasion, psychology, etc. It's all there. You can see the different stuff I do. If you're looking for branding for a campaign, all the kind of stuff I do is laid out on robinkoerner.com now. And also, you can get a copy of my book there if you can keep it, which you kindly mentioned before. Or if you don't want any of that, but you just kind of like the stuff I do, stick your name in the subscribe box, and I'll add you to my low quantity, high quality mailing list, which I'm not spending near enough time on, but I've got to be collecting names, right?
But the more people that are added, the more time we'll spend on it.
Yeah, that's true. I'm also on Twitter, so that's rkoerner, RKOERNER is my handle. And you know what? Recently, I did a few good interviews on YouTube, which I'm really pleased with. The first was with Andrew Yang. The second was with a guy called John Wood Jr. from an organization, Better Angels, that I mentioned at the top of the show. Mm-hmm. Related to the Project H. But most recently, I did an interview with Ammon Bundy, the Ammon Bundy, following statements about immigration, that I think was one of the most phenomenal things I've seen him come up, when we got going. We really got into immigration in some detail. That was kind of cool. So check any of that out. What else?
I forgot to, you've thrown your hat in the ring, haven't you?
Well, I don't know. I've kind of thrown a hat in a ring. I obviously want to save liberty in America, and that's still my big shtick. But if Brexit isn't done by October 31st, I and a lot of other Brits, because I'm still a Brit, even though I'm also an American, will be very angry. So I did actually today, for the first time ever in my life, I've done anything like this. I sent an application to the Brexit Party to stand for Parliament if there is an election, in the event, a general election, in the event that Brexit doesn't happen as promised. I'm sure they've got tens of thousands of great candidates who don't live 5,000 miles away in Seattle. So, I'm not holding my breath. But yes, I did that. And I would be delighted to see in America a vehicle as inspiring and effective as the Brexit Party to get me to do the same thing in the US. Until that time, I'm happy to help any liberty candidates in the US.
Anywhere in the Anglosphere, Robin Koerner is available.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Anywhere where English is the primarily spoken language,
yes.
Robin is here. So robinkoerner.com, that has the interviews and everything else on it, right?
Hasn't got the interviews. That's just YouTube. Just stick my name into YouTube.
Okay, I'll look those up and I'll put those in the show notes. Yeah. So
okay. Yeah, the articles. Okay. Some of my articles are there. But yes, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, Robin, thank you again for joining us. And guys, if you'll stick around for the outro, I want to talk to you a little bit before I let you go. But guys, thank you again for joining us on My Fellow Americans. Be sure to tune in tomorrow on Muddy Waters Media, Thursday for the Writer's Block. Matt even told me who his guest is. I literally forgot it as soon as he told me, but it's going to be great. Be sure to check that out tomorrow. Friday, I think we're having an episode of Mr. America, The Bearded Truth with Jason Lyon. I think his back is okay enough for him to be resuming that again for his what I call his Wholesome Sabbath episode. I call it that. No one else calls it that. I just do it. His Shabbat Shalom episode of the Mr. America, The Bearded Truth. He's total Gentile. Have a great weekend, and then join us again for Monday, where I believe again we'll be having the non-Shabbat episode of Mr. America, The Bearded Truth with Jason Lyon. Join us that Tuesday for the Muddy Waters of Freedom, where Matt Wright and I parse through the week's events with the special, I don't have a good way to describe. Just tune in. It's two guys, someone who's also like me, and we just kvetch over what happened for the week. And then tune in again next week, next Wednesday for My Fellow Americans, where I will be interviewing Chloe Valderi and talking about the theory of enchantment. So that'll be fun. So guys, again, thank you to Robin Koerner. Thank you all for tuning in, and God bless.
They say about an eye for an eye in a time when the blind lead the blind. Who am I to deny I would cry when a loved one dies? I recognize that body outside, bullet holes in the body that was alive. Now confined to a chalk outline. Find out how, but you never know why. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. That's my sister, mother, father, brother, son. That's one of mine. All these years I close my eyes, open up to only find I'm in line. There's a pointless murder happening all the time.
we